Good morning, everybody. Warm welcome this morning to our webinar. Our healthcare webinar will be starting in a couple of minutes. Please familiarise yourself with the panel on the right-hand side. If you have any questions throughout the webinar this morning, then please just use that and we'll answer those in the Q&A session. So we'll just be starting it in a couple of minutes. Lisa, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we've got a few more people joining us now, which is good. So we'll kick off if that's okay with you, Lisa.
That's great.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending this morning's webinar on healthcare trends in 2021. We hope that the next 30 to 40 minutes is going to be really informative and interesting for you all as Lisa will run through the findings from our recent research. If you're struggling to see the slides or you have any audio problems at all, then please just refresh your browser throughout the webinar. We should last about 30 to 40 minutes. We've also got a section at the end for Q&A, so please use the questions section on the menu on the right-hand side if you have any questions, and we'll pose those questions to Lisa at the end of the webinar. For those of you that are unfamiliar with us both, I'm Simon Marett from Ellerton Marketing. Ellerton Marketing is a specialist healthcare consultancy. We specialise in marketing for healthcare practitioners and healthcare businesses. So everything from branding and website design through to market research, brand strategy. Lisa, would you like to say a few words about Zing Insights?
Yes, thanks, Simon. I launched Zing Insights 10 years ago, and the intention was to help our clients to understand their customers and their targets better, and through that understanding to help them to direct their resources and their investments where they'll have the most impact, so increasing customer acquisition, customer loyalty and advocacy, and ultimately improving the bottom line.
Thank you, Lisa. So without further ado, we'll pass you over to Lisa, who will run you through the findings from our research. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, so just a little bit of background on the project to start off. We conducted a series of 3 separate but interlocking and iterative surveys using the Zing Insights panel between November 2020 and March 2021. The first online survey looked at overall experiences of health and wellbeing during the pandemic. The second explored triggers and barriers to private healthcare usage, and the third looked at expectations coming out of lockdown and also gave us some updated measures on COVID experiences and vaccine intentions. Each study achieved samples of 500 plus, 600 for the 2 of the surveys, and the sample profiles broadly reflective of the UK adult population in terms of age, gender, socioeconomic group and ethnicity. We're going to start setting the scene a little in terms of our participants' personal experience of having COVID. Our data shows that just 5% of the UK adult population had tested positive for COVID by January 2021, but another 13% believe they've experienced COVID. Women were more likely to have tested positive for COVID than men, 8% versus 5%. They were also more likely to experience moderate symptoms, 4% versus 1% of men. And interestingly, in our sample, socio-economic group had no impact on the proportion of positive COVID tests. However, that could reflect a degree of reluctance around testings for those working in the unskilled or gig economies. Overall, 1 in 4 claim to still be experiencing symptoms issues as a result of COVID-19. And looking at the data in more detail, women are significantly more likely to experience long COVID than men, 31% versus 15%. And this corresponds with research published today. In line with the latest ONS research, a combined total of 92% of participants had been vaccinated already, 58%, or would accept the vaccine as soon as it's offered, 34%. 4% were unsure, and 3% wouldn't accept a vaccine. For the vaccine rejectors, the primary reasons for rejection are around virus risk perceptions, confidence in medicine, needle phobia, ethical concerns, things like animal testing or animal products, and breastfeeding. In comparison to many other countries, UK take-up intention is extremely high. Russia, for example, is recording 42% vaccine intention, France 57%, and South Africa 61%. Intentions in Spain and Italy are at 80%, Mexico and China 85%, and Brazil 88%. All much closer to the UK levels, and perhaps aligned to the success of COVID management throughout the pandemic. So over now to Simon for a quick poll to find out a little bit about your experiences of COVID-19 and coronavirus and its impact on your physical and mental health.
Thanks, Lisa. The first poll this morning, we've got 3 in total, is the health impact from the pandemic. So if you could answer on your screen in just a second, to what extent do you feel COVID-19 coronavirus has negatively impacted your physical and mental health? Severely, moderately, mildly, not at all, unsure, don't know. So I'm just going to launch that poll now. Okay, we're just collecting those responses, so another 10 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. I'm just going to share those results. So Lisa, I don't know if you can see these results as the presenter, but we're seeing 5% severely, moderately 11%, the majority, a vast majority, 68% mildly, not at all 16%, and no for 0% for don't know. So mildly coming out on top there. I'm just going to hide those results.
We're going to start by looking at physical health during the pandemic, and we'll come on to mental health. So just over a quarter of adults have experienced a physical health concern during the pandemic, and the majority of those, 76%, have consulted with the NHS for those concerns. Women were significantly more likely to have experienced a physical health concern during the pandemic than men, but perhaps surprisingly were less likely to reach out to the NHS for their concerns. 75% of them reached out versus 80% of men. Ratings for experiences with the NHS during the pandemic are positive. More than 1 in 4 rated their experience excellent. Almost 3/4 rated their experience excellent or good, delivering a mean average overall rating of 3.96 out of 5. It could be that there's a sense of support for the NHS during this very difficult time. Mental health. We asked participants to what extent they felt COVID had impacted their mental health, and I think the big takeout is that 2/3 of the UK adult population had been impacted to some degree, and just 1/3 said that there'd been no impact. It's probably no surprise that to learn that men are significantly less likely to admit to an impact on their mental health than women, 54% of men versus 78% of women. It's also interesting that younger people are more likely to have experienced a greater mental health impact than older people. Incidence levels are at 88% for the under 35s, 63% for 35 to 44-year-olds, and just 35% of over 65s. For those experiencing a negative impact to their mental health, we asked how likely they are to seek professional support in the next 6 months, and 2/3, 67%, won't. 15% were unsure, and 18% said they definitely or probably would. Over to Simon again for another poll to explore your views on NHS waiting times.
Okay, our next section is going to be on the NHS. So acceptable NHS waiting times. What do you consider to be an acceptable waiting time to receive NHS treatment? Less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 7 to 9, 9 to 12, or over 12 months. I'm just going to launch that poll now. Okay, those results are coming in. That's great. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm just going to share those results now. So Lisa, again, you probably can't see these, but we're seeing less than 3 months to be the vast majority of the people that have responded, and 3 to 6 months. So 55% less than 3 months, and 3 to 6 months, 45%. So I'll hide those results now, but very interesting compared to our sample, Lisa. Very interesting.
Let's have a look at what our sample said. So we asked those who were waiting for NHS treatments, and that's 41% of our participants, how long they'd been waiting already and what they considered to be an acceptable waiting time on the NHS. More than half had been waiting for more than 6 months, including 22% who'd been waiting for more than a year. Whereas the vast majority, 83% of them, similar to you, believe that an acceptable waiting time would be less than 6 months. Actually, the results from our poll today are very similar to the results from our overall sample of participants. We'll explore the impact that waiting times could have on the private sector shortly. In terms of expectations of the NHS post-pandemic, it's interesting that just over a quarter, 26% of our sample believe that all healthcare services should revert to face-to-face post-pandemic, whereas the majority believe that healthcare services should be delivered in the most efficient and or appropriate way, with some face-to-face, but equally some online or telephone provision, including 1% who actually prefer telephone and online healthcare services. Moving on, comfort levels for completing most online or postal healthcare services and screening services are relatively high, but it's no surprise that comfort levels reduce with age and socio-economic group. Essentially, the older you get, the less comfortable you are with remote healthcare services, and greater comfort levels for AB socio-economic groups versus C2D are likely to be aligned to digital access and savviness. So moving on to our final poll for today. Simon, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So one of the questions we asked was about private healthcare insurance. What percentage of the UK population do you think have access to private healthcare insurance? So less than 5%, 5 to 15, 15 to 25, 25 to 35, or more than 35. So I'm just going to launch that poll. Okay, that's in progress. Okay, great. Last few responses. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I'm going to share those results. So what we're seeing, Lisa, is less than 5% is 9%, 5 to 15, 45%, 15 to 25, 36%, 25 to 35 is 9%, and nobody has thought that more than 35% of the UK population have access to private healthcare insurance. So some interesting results there.
Simon.
I'll pass you back.
Super. Thank you. So what we found was that actually almost half of all adults have paid for healthcare services at some point, either personally or through health insurance. It's not surprising that paid healthcare incidence increases with age, from just 10% of those aged under 35 years up to 43% of those aged 65 plus. A total of 14% of the UK population have access to private healthcare insurance, either personally 5%, or through a company policy, 9%. And that's consistent with a 2019 study conducted by Finder.com that showed that 13% of the UK adult population had access to private health cover. In terms of the health and wellbeing service providers experienced, we asked participants from a prompted list which they'd heard of, which they were aware of, and which they'd ever used. And we've shown those achieving more than 10% awareness here. Given its long history, it's probably no surprise that Bupa achieved the highest awareness overall, with more than 8 in 10 having heard of Bupa and 2/5 having used it, delivering a conversion rate of something like 22%. However, it's perhaps more surprising that more recent additions to the health and wellbeing market, organisations like Pharmacy2You, Babylon and Medichecks, are already achieving really positive conversion rates, 20%, 17% and 20% respectively, despite their lower levels of awareness. Moving on, we asked participants, for those who hadn't previously paid to access healthcare, we asked whether they would consider paying should the need arise. More than half, 54%, said they would, but there are significant differences by age. Almost 3/4, so 74% of those aged 35 to 44 years would pay for private healthcare versus 43% of those aged 45 to 54 years old and 48% of 55 to 64-year-olds. We were interested to find out what the barriers were to private healthcare consideration. And we asked participants which reasons they would not consider paying for private healthcare services. And there's a definite belief that paying for private healthcare in some way undermines the NHS. 63% said they prefer to support the NHS, 43% said they don't mind waiting for the NHS, and 38% said they already paid for the NHS. 7% saying it's difficult to work out which provider to use or is safe. But under what circumstances might someone consider private healthcare? As we saw earlier, 41% of participants are currently waiting for NHS treatments, and of those, more than half have been waiting more than 6 months, 22% waiting more than a year. So when we see long waiting times as a primary trigger for private healthcare, we can only deduce that private healthcare could well benefit from pandemic backlogs. Faster referral to specialists was a strong trigger for ABC1 participants, as was convenience, so being able to choose when the treatment's carried out. Men were significantly more likely to highlight convenience as a trigger for private healthcare, whereas women were significantly more likely to highlight access to alternative therapies as a trigger for private healthcare consideration. Other reasons for consideration include access to different or more effective medication, access to the latest technology equipment, quality of care, poor NHS treatment, and access to alternative therapies. Moving on to work and the workplace, a third of the working population in our sample had continued to work at their usual place of work. 42% were working from home and 8% were furloughed. For those working from home, we asked whether they expected to return to their usual workplace within the next 6 months. Less than half, 48%, said yes, they expect to return to their usual workplace. The remainder were unsure, 25%, or wouldn't, 27%. Looking at the key concerns during and coming out of lockdown, it's unsurprising that the economy represents the single largest area of concern. 76% are concerned, followed by virus mutation, 67% concerned, another lockdown later in the year, 62%, and the current COVID situation itself, 59%. Women were significantly more concerned about their own personal financial security than men, 18% unconcerned versus 27% of men. Perhaps unsurprising, since financial security is likely to be linked to working status, and women are significantly more likely to work part-time and have higher propensity to work in hospitality, health and social care. Looking forward, we asked participants what they're most looking forward to post-lockdown. And it's, again, probably no surprise that the standout response was meeting friends and family, 91%. But what comes next might not be quite so obvious. Eating out, 79%, shopping for pleasure, 55%, hugging and physical contact, 63%. Going to the pub in sixth place at 45%. Women were much more likely to be looking forward to that physical contact, hugging, going to the theatre, shopping for pleasure, or going to the hairdressers and beautician. Men were much more likely to be looking forward to the return of live sporting events. 3/4 were looking forward to travelling within the UK. 60% were looking forward to short haul travel, 44% looking forward to long haul travel, and 1/4 of those had already booked a holiday abroad this year. So to summarise for today, I'd like to leave you with a few key statistics from today's webinar. 66, so 2/3 of the adult population said their mental health had been negatively impacted by COVID-19, and 30% have been severely or moderately impacted. 3/4 of the population believe that post-pandemic healthcare doesn't have to completely revert to face-to-face. Almost half have paid for healthcare at some time, and of those who haven't, more than half would if the need arose. The key triggers for private healthcare consideration are waiting times, faster referral to specialists, and convenience, so being able to arrange your appointments at a convenient time. And 14% currently have access to private healthcare insurance, either personally or through their company. I'd like to hand over again to Simon for any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a really great presentation. Thank you. Just let the audience know that that was a cut down version of the full research. We've got actually a full deck that we're going to make available, but we just wanted to give a summary for today's webinar because we could have gone on for quite a long time. But if you have any questions this morning for Lisa or myself, there is a questions tab on the right hand side that you can use. So just type your questions in there and we'll do our best to answer them for you. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the Ellerton Marketing and the Zing Insights website from tomorrow. So we'll notify you all of that. So if you want to go back in and look at the slides yourself or revisit the webinar, you'll be able to do so. So I'm just going to turn our webcams on. Give me a second. So Lisa, I've got a couple of questions that have come in this morning.
Okay.
The first one, why do you think younger people's mental health has been more affected than older generations?
I think the sorry, I'm just sharing my webcam too. I think the high likelihood is that younger people have been more affected because there are perhaps more aspects of their life that have been affected. So when we're talking about younger people, we're talking about under 35s as being the lowest band, and 35 to 44-year-olds, for example, who may have children in school. They may be part of the sandwich generation, so they may have been having to cope with young children and homeschooling. They may have been having to cope with challenges with managing their parents' care as well as their children's care and working within the pandemic environment, whereas the over 65s are more likely to be retired, and although there may be a caring aspect to those roles, they're perhaps not pulled in as many different directions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa. So the next question has just come in is relating to kind of online and postal health services. Obviously, a lot of us have been forced into using those this year. So with such a large number of people from the sample happy to continue with online postal health services, will we ever revert back to purely face-to-face consultations?
I think the high likelihood is that no. I'm just going back to that slide actually. I think the high likelihood is that no, that's not likely to happen. I think the organisations themselves have found that it's more efficient and more effective for them to manage healthcare across multiple channels, whether that's telephone consultations, online video consultations, prior to face-to-face appointments. There's only really a necessity in many instances for those face-to-face appointments to happen in some instances. And if it improves efficiency, then I think most people are going to be very accepting of that.
Okay, great, thank you. I've got a question here about a couple of questions coming about the NHS. So Obviously, from our survey, the NHS comes out very well, you know, both in terms of the high scores that we've seen, but also the sense of loyalty that people have got to the NHS over the last 12 months with, you know, the pandemic. So the questions come in is the NHS seems to fare very well from the research, with a real sense of loyalty. As we move through this year and next year, with waiting times continue to rise, do we anticipate that those scores and ratings for the NHS will rise or fall?
I think actually this study and today's study that's been published suggests that NHS scores will fall over the next 12 months, in part because of the backlog of the pandemic. So there's an expectation that with longer waiting times, with a lower satisfaction from a personal perspective, is likely to impact NHS overall satisfaction. And actually there's been increased support during the pandemic because of the extreme pressure that's been placed on the NHS, and so probably increased satisfaction as a result. So people's standards have fallen almost in their minds, that they accept a different level as a result.
It was interesting that both the sample and our audience today, you know, 6 months seems to be the maximum kind of waiting time that people are prepared to kind of wait for, you know, for treatment. So, another question has come in just regarding the NHS, is you know, with waiting lists predicted to grow this year, you know, what do we anticipate that to mean for the kind of private health sector? You know, are we expecting a kind of surge of activity and a push of patients into the private sector?
I think from the research that we've conducted, we can only deduce that if waiting times increase, that there will be a move towards private sector to enable people to manage their health. You know, that it's very clear from the triggers for engagement in private healthcare that long waiting times is the key trigger. And we know that waiting times are going to increase over the next 12 months. And so the likelihood is that there will be a boom to the private sector as a result.
Okay, that's great. If there's any further questions, then please use the question box on the right-hand side. Like I said, the webinar will be made available. A recording of it will be on both the Ellerton Marketing websites and the Zing Insights websites from tomorrow. So we'll notify you of that. But if there are no further questions this morning, we'll draw everything to a close. Thank you very much for your time, and we hope you enjoyed the session and the presentation. Like I said, we will be doing further research this year. This is our third survey that we've done. There'll be a fourth and fifth, hopefully later this year, that we'll update you on. And until that time, if you do need to get in touch with us, then my details and Lisa's details are on the screen, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.